Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unified Purpose, the podcast where we share inspiring tales of compassion, resilience, and community spirit. I'm your host, Shannon, and I'm joined here today with a very special guest, Sue Harnett from Rewriting the Code. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm excited.
Yay! I'm excited as well. So, first, let's start out with a little you introducing yourself, maybe differently than I would. Let us know, kind of how you got to this point, and what you're doing now, and all about rewriting the code, anything that you think would be relevant to share.
Sure. So I am talking to you from Durham, North Carolina. I went to Duke University, which is where sort of the history of rewriting the code is based. I had worked on a small team that served as consultants in the computer science department. Gosh, this point probably 8+ years ago. And the work that we were asked to do was to try and understand why so many women come into college and they start taking computer science classes. But after the first course, there's a big drop off. And after the second course, there's usually another big drop off. Which leads to women representing only about 1 in 5 of the computer science graduates across the United States. And I didn't realize that that was the case. And I just got very passionate about wanting to address this issue, not just at my alma mater, but across the US. And actually now it's really across the globe.
I am very excited about this idea because it's something that I've actually weirdly covered a lot during college. I went to Temple, which is a more, I would say, liberal school, and which these things are like openly discussed, which is really nice. But yeah, this is my sister went to school for architecture, and which like sometimes is considered STEM, sometimes is not. But this was something that was really present in a lot of her classes, which were like engineering geared, is that she was like one of the only women in the classroom. And I always saw this as a problem because I know so many smart women that are capable of this, and I know they're not leaving because they're not capable.
Absolutely.
And it's really nice to see some awareness on this. So can you kind of talk about maybe the themes of what you noticed were the reasons why you saw that drop off?
Yeah, absolutely. I had the luxury of speaking with a lot of students back when I was doing that project, and since then, hundreds, if not thousands, of students. And there's some very common themes. I think at the end of the day, the through line is the issue of belonging. And to your point, you you get into a conversation oftentimes with a young woman in college, and it's the issue of I feel like I'm one of the only, or that professor at the front of the classroom is generally a man, and they gravitate maybe toward more of the male students, or I feel like I'm a well-rounded person. I love my courses in computer science, but I also like to do other things. And some of the guys being sort of 24/7 techie, if they come home from class, they're working on projects, maybe doing some consulting work on the side, and then, polishing off their night with gaming. So I think, like many industries, women are just not historically have not been very well represented. And that's what we're hoping to change.
Yeah, I think that's really wonderful because I do think that having a sense of belonging really does contribute in your ability to kind of stick with something, or more or less like the inspiration to stick with something, especially when it's difficult, because there's I talked to many engineering majors at Temple as well, that it's a really tough major, like in comparison to a
Absolutely.
lot, not that others are not difficult, but it's something that is more strict and something that there's less room for error in, because there's many things that are more opinion based or like research based that are not necessarily like provable, as long as you can, prove it with some kind of evidence. But like something that you need to know that's finite is sometimes a much difficult thing to register than a lot of other subjects. And it's really tough when you don't feel like you're supported in that position.
Yeah. And I think this is human nature, right? I almost feel like we're in this big sociology project sometimes where, we as human beings want to be able to connect with people who we share common identities with, whether that be how we grew up or our life experiences or our culture. And we need role models. And I'm a former athlete. And right now, I have to tell you that I am all about Caitlin Clark. I find it fascinating that anyone that you put her name out to seems to know exactly who she is and the impact that she's having on women's basketball across the globe. And what makes me the most excited are the little girls who are able to see her and say, gosh, I, might watch a NBA game and see LeBron play, but now I actually see a woman who looks like me and other great players in the league who you can identify with. And that's so very important. If you think about it, um, the names that we hear associated with founders and leaders of tech companies sound like Steve and Mark and, names Elon. There's not a lot of Shannons out there, and we need more of them.
Yeah, it is something. It also makes you believe that it's possible, because so much of the world is likely telling you that it's not,
Mhm.
because of the stigma around being a woman. And like to know and see someone that has achieved it before you or something similar before you gives you that motivation to think, no, I can do this. Like, just because people are telling me that I can't, or that, I'm not as equipped to, or whatever it
Yeah.
may is, that's gone when you're able to see it for yourself, that is possible. And there's also the impossible is possible, like not even seeing it. But it's it's better said than done when you don't, have that model to kind of reflect after.
Yes, 100%. And the way that we're different and the approach that we took at its foundation is that we are university agnostic. So if you ask a lot of the tech companies where they go, how do you go about identifying potential candidates for internships or jobs? You typically hear a list of like the top 20 ranked computer science and engineering programs, and that's such a tiny subset. And there's a lot of very brilliant men and women that go to universities and colleges all across the US and beyond. And to think that we are focusing on just a very small segment is just fundamentally wrong. There are brilliant people at every school, and we feel that we want to aggregate and provide access to all of the women that we serve, and not just a small portion. So, we want to level the playing field by saying, like, oh, that woman who's so hard to find. Well, if you're only going to 20 schools and women are already only 20% of the population, then your chances of identifying a woman are really small. But all of a sudden, we have 37,000 women in our community. So we can take that issue right off the table.
Yeah, exactly. There's also, on top of just, college students, there's also people that maybe didn't get to go to college, but there's like classes in which they can take, or like certificates that they can get done that like qualify them, if not equally as people that have gone through a very traditional path, that maybe it was just easier for them financially or
Sure.
whatever it may be, but that doesn't mean that they're not level playing field with other people that had more opportunities.
That's 100% correct.
Yeah, I love the idea of having like an equal footing, because it is something that a lot of people struggle with, and like I think breaking down that barrier of what people believe is the top is not necessarily just because of like the best school or whatever, and not to take away from the achievements of people that have been able to reach that point, but it's not always accessible for everyone.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I found that in my own experience, because growing up in New York City as a first gen student, the reason I had the opportunity to attend Duke University was because I was able to secure an athletic scholarship. But then when I got to school, I was so intimidated by my peers, particularly in the classroom. And I really did feel like I didn't belong there, that I was a student athlete and I was not of that caliber. And it was really the built-in family of my teammates who, older and wiser, those juniors and seniors, who said, "Oh my gosh, we all felt this way, but you absolutely are bringing an amazing, rich set of experiences and flavor to this community that really needs you to be here, and you belong here." And that was really transformative for me. And that gets to the piece of community, right? Like, so this is not golf or tennis. It's not like a single person sport. It's a team sport. And the more support and infrastructure and people that you can find that are passionate about what you're passionate about and are in sort of that same stage of their journey, that's where the magic happens, because we put so much into our near peers, which is what we like to talk about. Like, so oftentimes, like in mentorship, I'll have companies say, "Oh, maybe I can get someone from the C-suite to talk to the women." And it goes back to something you said earlier, Shannon, about inspiration. We can get incredible inspiration from people who have had this amazing journey and we aspire to be. But I think from a practical perspective, you want to talk to someone who's, maybe in your age group, who's just ahead of you, and you
Mm-hmm.
want to hear their experience that becomes very relevant to you. And all of a sudden it becomes, instead of it being insurmountable,
Mm-hmm.
you actually can talk to someone about, how did you practically do it? What courses did you take? What do I not know that maybe you've already experienced that I have to get smarter about?
No, that's a really good point too, because I think that it's sometimes, even if you have this inspiration of something that appears unattainable, like someone much like further in their career than you, and like maybe much older and wiser, there's still so much to learn from them. But there's also that it's very daunting to just see someone in that position, because it's also sometimes you can't relate to the time, like you think it was attainable when they were younger but maybe not now. And so to see someone closer to where you are and how they did it, it's like a stepping stone of, I can look
Absolutely.
at this person for the next step, and then I can look at this next person for that step, and that is much more it's easier for people to be inspired by something that they can relate to, rather than something that they may appear as impossible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can you kind of talk about what kind of programs and different functions that you provide to foster that sense of community that you just talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a virtual component of what we do, and we have an in-person component of what we do. And the virtual really is equals access for us, where a woman from Ghana or Germany or Canada or wherever in the world she may sit can interact with her peers on a private Slack channel. We have one for our student population, and we also serve early career women. So, what we like to say is we have like a 10-year runway that we support. So,
Mhm.
from first year of university through about 6 years of professional experience. And we treat those two communities differently because there are different challenges that
Mhm.
you face when you're a student versus when you're in your early career. So that community and the fact that you could log on at any point in time during the day or night and typically find someone who you can connect with or ask a question of is incredibly powerful. And then, like, again, getting away from this school driven model and looking at regions. So, right now, during the summer, is one of my most favorite times of the year because we have literally thousands of our members are doing internships all over the world. So we have hundreds of women in New York and Seattle and San Francisco Bay and London. And where we have large concentrations of women, we do a lot of in person events. So I have to admit my bias on New York City. I just love it. I travel there often. And one of the first things we do, I'll just use New York as an example, is the very first event that we have in the summer in June is a welcome event. So, regardless of where you're doing your internship, you are invited to come together. And really, the goal of that night is to make like 3 friends. We want to have that community and that connection of women across experiences and often universities, and let them interact with each other and see where those commonalities are and their interests. And then they start to share their experiences at their respective companies where they're interning. And then one of the things that we do, which is just a phenomenal opportunity, and this is like similar to like maybe a high school athlete being recruited, is that you get to go to campus and visit the prospective schools that are recruiting you. In a similar nature, we encourage our company partners to invite these incredible women who are interning in their city to their office. So let's say that you're in New York City and you're interning at Goldman Sachs, but on a Wednesday night after work, you can go to Netflix, know that some of those women that you met in that welcome event will be there, and you can have dinner and you can interact with Netflix women engineers, and you can ask like, my gosh, I just watched this movie and it was amazing and I loved it. And then I logged on the next night to watch another movie and like it was amazing. Like you had all these other movies right? So that's technology. And the beauty of what we're in the exposure business. So we want to we take the stance that every company is a tech company. And you have to think about that, right? Like so it's really true, right?
Yeah,
Because whether
everyone has to
you're
be
working
involved
at
here.
a bank or Netflix or American Express or um, GlaxoSmithKline or so many companies across so many industries are embedded in technology. They need software engineers, they need AI, they need data analysts. And we're here to say, I think the nirvana would be to combine your passion around technology with whatever else as
You're
that human being that you're passionate about. So I don't have any tech background whatsoever. I'm like in that sociology, community building, belonging space. But if I were an engineer, I could see myself wanting to work like at the WNBA or at Peloton, right? Where it's a combination of sports and technology.
I think that's really, really great. It's just to have that sense of community in all of these different areas and also expand it to their interests, because I think that a lot of people in getting involved in tech kind of feel boxed in, especially women in tech, because already there's this stigma around, being in that space of like, you kind of have to accept what you get
Mm,
almost, because you feel like, okay, well, I'm not going to get another opportunity like this or whatever it may be. But no, that like also fosters that um like misconception that you can't kind of do what you love in any kind of area that would make you happy, because tech in an area that isn't something that's your speed or like your likeness is not, maybe not going to make you happy, but you do like what you do. It's just not, something you can relate to. Whereas if you were in a different space, and having these community events is a way to be able to, open doors to get into those spaces. And that's absolutely wonderful.
yeah, absolutely. And the companies absolutely love it. And then they follow up and like, hey, we're releasing our internships in 2 weeks, and you can start to apply. And it's just it's of no fault of young college students and early career professionals. It's you don't know what you don't know.
Hmm.
And if every company is a tech company, how in the world could you explore that by yourself? So that's where we come in to say, we're aggregators where we contract with a lot of companies so that you could get that behind the curtain look into what is it really like there. You could maybe connect with a near peer who works there and get the down low and make sure that everything the recruiter is saying is true.
Hmm.
You get to walk through the doors of NVIDIA. So, NVIDIA is one of our longest term partners. I think maybe when we started, I had to explain to students who NVIDIA was. Now they've blown up into, one of the most incredible companies in the world. And last night we had over 50 women walk through the doors of NVIDIA, be able to see, meet, feel the culture, the state of the art building that people work in. That's a game changer. And I feel like, it's almost analogous to like visiting college campuses. Now you're visiting company campuses, and you're like, sometimes you have a really good connection and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
And we're all humans, and we all react to things that make us feel welcome, comfortable, that we belong, that if we do go to work there and I am one of the only women on my team, how can I interact with other women in the company? Is there an employee resource group that I could be a part of, or can I get a mentor? And all different types of things like that.
Yeah, I really like what you mentioned about like kind of getting a slight understanding of the company culture too, because that is way more important than a lot of people stress, of if you'll be happy in an environment, because a job can look really great on paper, but then you end up working in a space that you're not comfortable or like not optimal in of a worker. And to get an idea of that by getting into that space is exactly like touring a college campus. Like I've toured college campuses where I was like, this is culty. I don't really like this. Like, I'm not a culty person. I don't want to be a part of, like, I don't want this college to be my identity. And like, that
Right.
was what, like my standings of like what I determined on a college. And I couldn't see that necessarily through like a website, and touring it gives you that kind of, that yeah, more information. And it's like the same thing with a company, and not many you don't necessarily always get that opportunity. So this is like very great for young people to be able to have a better glimpse into what their future could look like.
Absolutely. And I think one of the challenges at the college level oftentimes is that, you are learning um, almost in a bubble of sort of the theory and the background, and all of that is really important. But I think, particularly for women, I find that the application of that technology and how does it impact human beings, make their lives better, or improve a process that's really frustrating, like being able to connect that application. And that's when it really comes to life. And
Hmm.
that's where you also start to get exposure of what type of role in technology do I want to sit with? Do I want to be a software engineer? Do I want to be a product manager? Different skill sets. Do I
Hmm.
love to work with numbers? Do I want to be a data analyst? What are those AI roles that are out there? And what do I have to make sure that I'm studying to position myself well to be able to get a role like that? So there are a lot of things that rewriting the code supplies to our membership that is outside their academic pursuits. So we don't teach computer science or engineering, God forbid. What we're doing is we're wrapping all of the success services around that education, right? We have virtual, and the reason they are virtual is the access piece.
Hmm.
All of our, so we have 2 to 3 online conferences every year. We have one coming up on August the 14th. It
That's my
is
birthday.
virtual, it is free. There will be over 25 tech companies there, and there will be about 2,500 to 3,000 graduate and undergraduate women in technology attending. It's an amazing way to learn, like, what is it that NVIDIA does? Or, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I went into tech, but what are the types of healthcare companies where I could work? I could work in a pharmaceutical company. I could work at a Medtronic, which is a medical device company. And, that's the beauty of the exploration and then starting to understand, well, what's the interviewing process like? And that's another thing that most young people don't have the opportunity to really learn what these tech companies' processes are for hiring.
Hmm.
So that usually consists of oftentimes a technical assessment before you even talk to a human. So if you don't score at a certain level, then you might not to get to talk to a recruiter. Now that's not
Hmm.
every company, but at some point in the process there will be a technical interview. And for a lot of the women in the community, 20 years old, you're on Zoom all of a sudden and you're having to whiteboard in front of 3 engineers.
Hmm.
That's kind of
Terrifying.
intimidating, right? So, what do? We provide tools and experiences where we can have a lot of our mentors do mock interviews, do
Hmm.
some of that whiteboarding, do behavioral interviews, and just get you comfortable and provide you the rules of the game so that you can be successful.
Yeah, it's really lovely to get that kind of experience, especially you kind of touched on a little bit earlier of the idea that you're going through school and you're learning a very specific skill set, but you're not necessarily experiencing something. And so everyone's learning kind of the same thing, and you might really enjoy learning it. But then when you're in a very traditional position, like practically after
Mm.
that, that might not be what you like. Like you might want to apply those skills to a different kind of position, and you might not know what that is, but to be able to get that experience to test things or like talk to people that are in those positions or know someone that's in those positions or different companies and different spaces is like it's hard sometimes to know what you want to do when you have no way of finding it out other than looking it up because you don't know what you don't know, as you said before. It's you might love what you're learning, but you might not know what you want to do with it, and you might have an idea but then you find out you don't want to do that at all.
Great, 100%. And I had a student very early on explain to me that she had 2 roommates. One was pre-med and one was pre-law. And everyone kind of knows the process for that, right? I mean, if
Mhm.
you're pre-law, you go to law school, you have to do these internships. If you're going to medical school, then after medical school, you have to do a residency. And you, even if you're not, deeply in it or know someone in those fields, you have a general idea of the path. And I think technology is so fast and
Mhm.
moving at light speed. And, now like you can't have a conversation throughout the day where AI doesn't come up. It's a lot of the, I don't know what that path looks like. Do I need to go to graduate school?
Mhm.
Should I work first? And, yeah, just figuring it all out. So, it takes a village, right? So that's kind of what we do. We have, it's important as well that we offer this program 12 months a year, because at different times of the year there are different challenges that the women are facing, right?
Mhm.
So this time of year they're immersed in those internships, but as soon as the school starts, which is like in 6 weeks, that's exactly when the technical recruiting process starts.
Mhm.
There's conferences in person and online and interacting with these tech companies. And on top of that, you're taking some of the hardest courses offered by your university. So
Huh.
it's a lot. And just the moral support and, just having to figure out time management and if I'm going to be applying to 40, 50, 60 or more internships, how do I do that at the same time that I'm taking data structures and algorithms? Like it's really hard.
No, it is really hard. There are definitely some. Oof, it's definitely harder to um have all of these moving parts in your life on top of like a very difficult course load. So to be able to navigate that and have a community that can help you, manage it is really, really amazing. Is a question out of curiosity. So for like speaking of a community helping you, there are people outside of this community that may not understand the importance of it.
Mm,
How do you talk to potential allies and
mm,
people about the importance of this mission and supporting people in this community? Because I know that the community almost exists in spite of people that don't support it, but I'm so
sure.
curious about like kind of how you discuss this with others.
Yeah. And there's it's such a great question, and there's so many different constituents as part of that question. So from our perspective, our hope is that students can find us as quickly as they get to campus as possible, right? We think it's really important to have that local community, and almost every campus has some sort of women in computer science or women in tech organization, right? So you get to meet your peers that you share a campus with and you're going to class with. But then on top of that, you can be part of a global community where you can get outside the bubble of your school. You can meet other women who your exact same age, who are going through the exact same thing that you're going through. And that's where the beauty of flipping the dynamic around from being one of the only to feeling like maybe you're one of many.
Mhm.
And you feel like you're part of something bigger. And I think the combination of both of those is really important. And we rely on a lot of our members that are already on these campuses all over the world to embrace those first and second year students and encourage them to be part of both of those communities. So that's one group. The other group that I feel pretty confident in speaking to now are the parents. I have two boys. I have one son who is at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and I have another son who is starting his gap year. He just graduated from high school,
Mhm.
and I am frozen, and that's crazy looking picture.
Ah!
Oh,
Don't even worry. We have the audio.
okay. All right.
I
That's
can hear
great.
you perfectly.
Unfrozen. Excellent. Um, and I think parents oftentimes are so well intentioned, but they often don't appreciate the challenges that their kids go through. And I think when you're in high school, oftentimes it is an individual sport. You know, you are trying to get to the top of your class. You're trying to apply to the best schools that you possibly can. And when you get to college, it really does become a sense of community. Of if you're going to be successful, it's not it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing to be part of a larger community that can be very supportive of each other. And oftentimes, too, we parents, I think of the biggest and the best and the most well established companies that I know about. I know about Microsoft and Apple and Netflix and Amazon and all these great places. And because every company is a tech company, and because everyone's different, you know, some people do really well in a large environment and therefore probably working on a very niche challenge.
Mhm.
And then there's others that want to be at a startup where they get exposed to so many things, but mom and dad have never heard of that
Mm.
organization before. And they're like, oh my God, and the benefits at Google are crazy. And, you know, so I think a lot of times students need support in trying to talk to their families and understanding. And one of the things that we also pay a lot of attention to in the community is the composition and the groups. I mentioned I'm first gen. About 30% of the members in Rewriting the Code are first gen. Their parents, their families, they love their respective kids, but if you haven't had the experiences, that's where we come in and we try and say like, hey, like we've got a program for students who are like you to be able to talk to other first gen alums or people who are working in these companies who understand your path. One of the first groups we put together was for our Black community. If you look at the statistics for Black, Latina, and Native American women in technology, it's a rounding error. And we have to make sure that we're putting communities together within the community so that folks understand the potential and have role models. And what we found in the Latina community was that from a cultural perspective, oftentimes, and this is a big generalization, but it came up a lot, that engineers were men.
Mm.
You know, I have male cousins who might be studying engineering, but women don't study those areas, right? So educating parents, family members around the opportunities that their daughters may have in technology and the impact that they could make in the world is something that's really, really important. So I feel very emboldened to talk about the fact that being part of something and not doing it on your own is actually braver than trying to do it on your own, and that you definitely are capable, and let's get you in an environment where you can learn from the people who came before you.
I think that is a perfect note to end on because it's very wholesome and we are a little over time, but I completely agree and believe in that exact purpose is that like sometimes people just thrive in a more optimal environment and knowing people that are doing something similar to them is so helpful in staying motivated and staying strong in when things are difficult. And I think I definitely mentioned the exact concept before, but it's so true. And to be able to see your organization supporting this so well, I'm really thankful to be able to get to chat with you today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love having the opportunity to talk about the women we serve.
Thank you so much. And I hope that anyone that could get involved in this community is able to see this and check out their link in the description, as that will be there. And thank you guys so, so much for listening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.